So let's move on to our third letter, and that is the ta. The ta looks a lot like the ba. It's drawn in the same way or written in the same way, except we have two dots on the top. I like to remember it by thinking that T stands for top and T also stands for two. So we have ta has two dots on the top. And the ta has a ta sound, ta sound like a T sound. And in Arabic we write the ta. The official name for ta is written the following way. It's written as ta. Okay. And also, like all the other letters, it comes in beginning, middle, and end versions. So let's look at those. In the first case, let's look at it in the beginning. What does the ta look like? Let's look at the word apple. In Arabic, the word apple is tufah. Tufah. Here we go. We start out with our ta in the beginning of a word, and then we connect the fa to it, an alif, and then we add a ha, tufah. So if you notice, it looks a lot like the ba in the beginning of a word. The only difference is that you have two dots at the top. Let's look at what it looks like in the middle. In the middle of a word, let's look at the word book. And in Arabic, book is written as kitab. Ki. And then we have to add our ta in the middle of a word. Looks just like the ba in the middle of a word, except it has two dots on the top. And let's finish it by doing the familiar alif. And finally, we'll put the familiar now ba. Becomes kitab. So in the middle of a word, it looks just like the ba in the middle of a word, except it has two dots on the top. Finally, at the end of a word, let's take an example. A girl, and in Arabic, a girl is referred to as a bint. So let's write that. We'll begin with our ba and bint. We now recognize that. Connected to a noon. We'll be studying that. And finally, we have our ta at the end of a word. And that's how it looks. Kind of like the ba, except the only difference is we have two dots on the top. So we have our little connector line and our ta. And that is how we write the ta in the beginning, middle, and end. And just like before, there are certain cases where we write it independently. We'll be studying that in a different lesson. So let's look at a few examples. Alright, so let's look at a few examples of connecting the ta in the beginning, middle, and end of words. So the first word will consist of a meme, and then a seen, and then an alif, followed by a ha. The second word will consist of an alif, and this is a connected alif because there's something coming before it, and a jim. And the last word will consist of a noon, a waw, and a ra. And we're going to be connecting ta in the beginning to these words. The next set of words are going to be words in which we're going to connect the ta in the middle. So here I have a seen and a ta marbuta. We'll talk about that later. An ayn, we'll leave a blank for the ta, a ya, and then a qaf, and finally we'll have a dal, a fa, leave some space for the ta, and a ra. And in the last set of words, we'll connect the ta at the end of a word. We'll have a ba followed by a ya, leave a blank for the ta, And here we have a meme with a ya. I have to add a shadda here. It's a really bad shadda. Let me add a better one. We'll talk about the shadda in a different lesson. And finally, we have a ta in the beginning of a word connected to a waw. Now let's add our letters. So in the beginning of a word, the ta looks like the ta in apple or tufah. Let's add that ta to our words. Go ahead and add it. We added it. We make sure we put the 2 dots on top. And we have timsah, timsah, or crocodile. In the second example, we do the same exact thing. Make sure we put the 2 dots on top. A lot of people forget these things. And we have taj, or crown. And then we'll add it to the last word. Make sure we have our 2 dots. And we have tanur. Tanur is a type of oven used to make tanur bread. And sometimes people make other things in a tanur oven as well. The famous tandoori chicken is made using a tanur, or what the Indians call a tandoor. Now, let's look at how we write it in the middle of a word. If we look at our previous example, kitab or book, we wrote the ta like that in the middle of a word. So let's go ahead and write that in this word. We begin like this, and that's it. And we add our 2 dots. Let's do that over here. Same thing. And let's do that over here. So now we have the word sitta, or 6, atiq, or old or aged, and finally daftar, or a notebook. Let's look at how to write it at the end of a word. And from our example, bint, a girl, we wrote it like this. Just a ta with a little connector in the beginning. Alright. Now that we have it back, we do our little connecting line, go up, and add our ta, our 2 little dots on top. Same thing goes here, little connector, go up, across and back up, and add our 2 dots. We'll leave the last example for later. Bayt means house, mayyit means someone who's died, and finally, in the last example, I'm not going to connect to the waw because waw is a non-connecting letter. We'll be studying those later. So if I have a non-connecting letter before my ta, I'm going to have to write it unconnected in its independent form, just like the bat. And that's it. That's how we write the ta in the beginning, the middle, and the end. Moving on to our third letter, that is the letter tha. It looks just like the ba and ta, except it has 3 dots on top. I like to remember tha equals 3. 3 on top. It looks like the ba and ta, except it has 3 letters, or 3 dots on the top. And this makes the th sound, tha sound. And in the beginning of words, it would look like, it looks just like the ba and the ta. The only difference is there's 3 dots on top. That's the only difference. So let's look at a few examples. The first example would be snow or ice, and that in Arabic is thalj, thalj. Notice the th sound in the beginning. Thal, thalj. There's our lam, and then a jim right there. Thalj, thalj. So in the beginning of a word, the tha is written just like a ba and a ta and a noon, but we'll talk about that later. But that's how it's written, 3 dots on the top. In the middle of a word, it's written in the following way. and we'll use an example of a statue. And a statue in the Arabic language will be a timthal. So timthal begins with a ta, and then a meme, and then we're going to add our ta or our tha in the middle of a word, and it looks just like the ba and the ta, except the dots are on top. Timthal. We put our alif connected, and then we put our lam. Okay? So, the tha in the middle of a word looks just like the ba and the ta. The only difference is there's 3 dots on top. In the final example, we're going to look at how the tha looks at the end of a word, and we're going to use the word triangle, and in Arabic, triangle is muthallath. So we begin with our meme, then we're going to put our tha in the middle of a word, muthallam, and then finally we are going to add our tha at the end of the word with 3 dots on top. So just like the ba and the ta, it's written the same way. The only difference is that we have 3 dots on top. Let's look at maybe 3 examples to solidify this. And the first example will be the tha in the beginning of a word. We'll begin with ayn, put a lam, and we'll put a ba at the end of a word. And if we want to add the tha in the beginning of a word, we just do that. And there it is. Thalab or fox. Let's look at an example with the tha in the middle of a word. We begin with ayn, leave a blank, and put a ra. In the middle of a word, we do as we did before. The only difference is we put 3 dots on top. Athara means he found. Finally, the example with the tha at the end of a word will be the following word. Just like before, we add, oops, I made a mistake, I put a ba there. What I meant to do was put the dots on top, and that becomes abath, or to disorganize. And that's it for the tha. That's how we write it in the beginning, the middle, and the end.